Everyone, if you're just coming in, there's lots of room up here. I am going to introduce Keith Jiron. He's the executive director and co-founder of the Evangelion Institute. He's a native of Colorado, graduated from Colorado State University in 1990. He went on to study at Conception Seminary College in Missouri and St. Thomas Theological Seminary in Colorado before completing his master's in theology and Christian ministry from Franciscan University in Steubenville. He is currently pursuing a doctorate in sacred theology with an emphasis in Mariology at the University of Dayton's International Marian Research Institute. Is that still current? Yep. All right. Which is an affiliate of the Mariana Monroe. Keith and his wife Kate have 4 sons. His hobbies include spiritual reading, fly fishing, and camping with his family. So give a big welcome to Keith Jiron tonight.
Thank you very much. That was nice. Well, it's good to be with you. It's a nice, peaceful drive. I drove in from Omaha. Is this on? I drove in from Omaha. I was in Norfolk on Friday and Monday, because with the Evangelion Institute, we do once a month, we meet with the Catholic school teachers to help them grow in their faith. And Melissa reached out to me, so it's great to be here. Does everyone have one of the handouts? Since you're up front, I don't want you to feel, I didn't want to stand way behind the podium since you're all at the back. So the RCIA people don't follow that. Okay, you know the joke, Catholics always sit in the back. That's one of them. Okay, you got that. Well, we're going to talk tonight about the Eucharist, share with you some insights, so I'm excited to do that. I just want to just point out that it's really something super central to our faith. You all know that. And even more than that, sometimes I think we miss how important it could be for our lives, for our everyday lives. However, it's something we can take for granted. I heard a cardinal years ago said something like, what you do daily, you do dully. What you do daily, you do dully, unless you do it devoutly, which you seldom do. Does that make sense? We take it for granted because if you've grown up Catholic, you have the Eucharist there every time, and so we kind of lose our desire, our hunger for it. So I just invite you to open your hearts and your minds anew tonight and see if there's some insight that God has for you that might make it new again, or make it exciting or fresh, or create a longing or a desire in your heart for the Eucharist. So, with that said, is there anyone here who is without pain or suffering or anxieties or worries, struggles in life? Anyone? You don't have any of those?
Wait till tomorrow.
So none of us goes through life unscathed with some sort of struggle or trial. Sometimes there's moments in life where you don't have those. But then, if you don't have those, like I just had a really rough time. People have been asking me how my Christmas was. I'm like, the first half was great. And then I had a little bit of a difficult time with some family members in Kansas City. We all have our struggles, right? But if you're in a good time in life, or whether or not, Joe had a nice prayer, because we only call on God when things are going bad, but when they're going good, we tend to forget. So all of us, though, if we look at ourselves, we struggle with one of the 3 lusts. You know, the 3 lusts from 1 John 2:16, the lust for power, or the lust for material goods, or the lust of the flesh. That's 1 John 2:16. So some have struggles with wanting power, some long for material goods, and some struggle with the lust of the flesh. You know that whole Me Too movement that's going on? Did the mic just go off?
Yeah.
So does humanity, why do you and I struggle with those things? What's the theological reason? Thanks. Why do we have that? One of those 3 lusts.
Concupiscence. Sin for sin.
Okay. The fancy word concupiscence, or the fall. We all have a fallen nature. Okay. St. Paul says in Romans 7:15, I don't understand my own actions. For I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. So how many of you in here would say that you're perfect? Kind of a trick question. I wanted to share with you, it's a true story in terms of, if you look at yourself, part of the spiritual life is, before we get into the Eucharist, is taking an honest look at yourself and your own struggles. You know, one of the things I've learned, I have 4 boys. The oldest just turned 16, he just got his driver's license. My youngest is 8. So I was talking to Lisa and Seth about Christmas. When they get older, starting to lose a little bit of magic, you know. But we still have the younger ones. So my 4 boys, and I used to think, before I got married and had kids, I thought I was a super patient person. And then once I started having kids, I thought, oh gosh, I am not patient. I struggle with impatience, sometimes yelling at the kids. So I want to share with you a story, because none of us is perfect. This is a true story. I think it happened like in the early 90s. It's about a father and a son in Hawaii, and one day they were driving through one of the roads on the island of Hawaii, and they got in this horrible car wreck. It was such a horrible wreck that the son lost his right arm. It got severed, and they couldn't put it back on. So, tragic, terrible accident. And so the dad's feeling bad, and the kid's arm's gone. He's missing an arm. And so one day the father goes in to the son and said, "Son, I just feel horrible. Is there anything I can do?" And the kid says, "Yeah, Dad, I think I'd like to take judo lessons. I hear you can take judo. You can do judo with one arm." So the dad gets him a sensei, a teacher, a judo teacher, and he starts to take his judo lessons. So for the first week or 2, he just starts working on the basics, just the fundamentals of judo, just the basics. After he kind of gets the basics down, he starts to work on one move. The sensei is teaching this kid with no right arm one single move, day after day, week after week, month after about 2.5 months, only one move. And he says one day, "I'm going to sign us up for a judo tournament." And the kid says, "Judo tournament? I've only been in judo for 2.5 months." So they go to the tournament. The kid wins his first round, second round, third round, all the way up to the final. On the car ride home, the kid's flabbergasted. He's just shaking his head and says to the sensei, "I don't know how I only know one move, just learned some basics, been in judo for 2.5 months, how I could win one round, much less all those others, even to defeat the champion of the state." And the sensei says, "You won for 2 reasons. The first reason why you won is the one move that you do know is the most effective move in all of judo. The second reason why you won is the only way to defend against that one move is by grabbing your opponent's right arm." So you say you have weaknesses and inadequacies. Scripture says, "In your weakness is my strength." Not only can I work in spite of your weaknesses, but I can work through them. God has great plans for you. It's a beautiful story. And so case in point, I was telling some of the RCIA people, I taught RCIA for 5 years at a big parish in Kansas City. And so every year, there would be some guy who'd been, he's probably retired, and his wife's been wanting to join the Catholic Church for the last 30 years, and finally she gets him to show up. And I'd have like 30 people in the circle in RCIA, and so this happened every year. There was one guy who just didn't want to be there, but finally gave in. And so I would meet with all of the candidates, and just ask them how it's going. "Hey, how's RCIA going? Are you still liking it? Are you still choosing it freely?" And so this particular year, this guy's name was Jack. He'd sit there outside the circle, and he just didn't want to be there. And sometimes he'd ask me this zinger of a question, trying to see if he'd get me mad or frustrated. And so when I was interviewing all of the RCIA folks, I was really surprised to hear this. They all said, "It's okay, I'm not really sure yet because it's still early on, but when I see that Jack keeps coming back, it tells me that it's okay for me to be there too." So God was working through Jack in spite of himself, right? used his weaknesses to keep the others coming. So anyways, just wanted to encourage you with that. So, with our weaknesses and our struggles, I propose to you that the Eucharist can be such a great help in that. The Eucharist is available to us, but we don't capitalize on its powerful strength, the gifts that it can give to us. We are all made for love, but we don't love perfectly. I don't love my children perfectly. I don't love perfectly because I'm filled with my own shortcomings and weaknesses. Okay? They say that sin can be defined as looking for love in the wrong places. Sin can be defined as looking for love in the wrong places. So what's the remedy for sin? Anyone? What's that? Confession? Yes. What else is the remedy for sin? Who is the remedy for sin? Jesus. Okay? Jesus is the remedy for sin. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says that the Eucharist is the source and summit. Okay, that's not on your handouts. The Eucharist is the source and summit. I propose that Jesus, who is fully present in the Eucharist, is the divine surgeon. He is the divine surgeon. We go to doctors for all kinds of different things, but we forget that the wound or the brokenness that's the most important, that keeps us from living life to the full, my own fallen nature and sinfulness, well, we have a great physician, the divine physician in Jesus. So when we receive the Eucharist, or we're going to have adoration, you can really pour your heart, open your heart up to the divine physician and say, heal me of my sinfulness, of those three lusts. So the Eucharist can be such a powerful balm, healing agent in Jesus himself if we just ask him to do that for us. It doesn't always happen overnight, but through the eyes of faith, we can see the Eucharist that way. It's not just, I believe that it's Jesus, and that's nice, I take it for granted, but if we really open our hearts when we receive the Eucharist or when we're in front of him in adoration, we'll talk a little bit more about that, okay? All right. For some people, there are recent surveys that talk about even most Catholics don't believe that Jesus is fully present in the Eucharist. There was a survey a couple of years ago, something like 40% or maybe more of Catholics just think it's a symbol. What a tragedy, because we know better. And so hopefully, if you're struggling tonight, or because it's kind of hard to believe, think about the man in the gospel who goes to Jesus to heal his son. And Jesus said, if you had faith, you could do so many more things. And the man who's asking, imagine one of your kids sick, and Jesus, who's performing all these miracles, you go up to him and say, hey, will you heal my child? Right? And he says, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who has faith. What's the guy say in the gospel? I do believe, help my unbelief. I do believe, help my unbelief. You can heal my child, but I don't have enough faith, but I do believe, help my unbelief. I believe with all my heart that if you're struggling to believe some things, if you ask Jesus, I do believe, Jesus, but help my unbelief, he will not answer that prayer because he wants you to believe. Okay? All right, so at your tables, I'm going to give you 1 minute, okay? I want you to talk about this. If you were to try to defend the real presence of the Eucharist, if you were to have to defend the real presence of the Eucharist, how would you go about it? I'm going to give you 60 seconds at your tables. Go, and then I want to hear what some of your answers are. Go.